In reality, all it is a circus act because I can't quantify if I've made you do 8 things before we actually hired you, or you did 3 things.
Today, we're back with Joric McClean. Joric, as you may recall, is an expat living in Lisbon. Joric worked was an HR manager for the Phoenix Suns, and he also worked for and was an HR director for a major company. Joric has decades of experience in the HR world, and I'm so happy to have you back today, Joric. Welcome back to Over 50 TV.
Hey, I'm happy that you're having me back. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, Joric, I got a lot of response from our viewers, people who really listen to you. And, one of the comments that I got was somebody said, it's about time that we heard the truth, what's behind or going on behind the scenes at HR. So I think that our viewers were very, very pleased with the answers, and you certainly helped a lot of people. So thanks again, Joric.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Very welcome.
So listen, here's what's going on now. I did get, as I mentioned, quite a few questions, and there are some things that people have asked me, and I just want to address them now. And these are things that really seem to drive candidates nuts when they're in the HR, when they're going through this whole interview process. First question somebody asked is, or one of the questions was, why does it take so long from the time that you submit a resume to getting hired? Can you give us some clues?
I'll try to be succinct. Part of it is the company's not ready to hire. They just put a job out, and if they get somebody, great. So that's a problem for the candidate because you're applying for a job that maybe really isn't necessarily or ready to be filled. The other thing is in the company end, if you're taking weeks or months, anybody that is a good quality candidate is going to get picked up by somebody before that. And sometimes it's company politics. It's just sometimes the recruiter is not on top of their game. Sometimes the hiring manager is taking too long to schedule interviews. There's a number of reasons, but the longer it takes, the less likely you're going to get a good candidate, and more likely you're going to drive people nuts that may really want to work for you, but you're dragging your feet. So they're going to go work someplace else.
Well, that saying, the early bird gets the worms, and it sounds like some of these companies could really end up losing a great candidate just because they're dragging their feet. Another question that's come up, and I've heard this even in my experience working at actually hiring hundreds of employees in my career. One of the things is, it says here, why is there too many hoops to jump through? Can you kind of address that? Because I've heard that too.
Yeah, I would say I'll try to give an HR answer to it, and then I'll give what my honest answer is. The HR answer is the more hoops, assessments, application, interview, Zoom call, phone screening, all of that stuff is supposed to, in theory, give you a better candidate or the right fit, sort of weed out candidates. In reality, all it is a circus act because I can't quantify if I've made you do 8 things before we actually hired you, or you did 3 things. I will go back to my days of, I walked into a place, I got an interview on the job, and I got hired. Just statistically, there's no greater, I guess, chance of me getting a job or not by having me do a personality assessment and a skills assessment and all these other things. There may be certain roles that you want to have a specific assessment, an accountant or a financial, making sure they have some numbers, but it shouldn't be cumbersome. Multiple interviews, especially for lower level jobs. What's the point? It just doesn't make sense. And again, the more cumbersome you're going to make the job process on the front end, an employee, let's say you get the job. If the company made you go through 10 hoops to get the job, how many hoops are they going to make you do in your daily job? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it does seem like a lot that people go through just to get a job. And in some cases, in some ways, it's also kind of very humbling for someone who's really looking. Now, another question that's come up multiple times is, the companies really, and I'm looking at this, this question is, the companies really look at references?
Oh, I am going to say from my personal experience, I don't, and I never did, and I didn't think they were worth the time. And the reason why is because You're only going to give a good reference. Nobody's going to give a bad reference. And also, when you're contacting companies, a former employer can only give certain information without that being litigious or potentially liable. So companies aren't going to give out much. But I will say that I'm about half of HR professionals say do references. So there's still a lot of people out there doing them and checking them. Why go through that process?
Another thing, though, one of the questions is digging. We heard that the companies really dig for dirt. Going on social media. Do you see more companies going on social media and checking out somebody's pages?
Yes, and frankly, I don't know most HR departments I know, whether they be Fortune 500 or small, don't have enough people and enough hours to check it. But somehow more people are checking. So a word to your audience. As much as you may not like it, if you're applying for a job, you may review your social media, because if you happen to have, I'll say, provocative pics or circumstances where you're in photos with different situations where you may not think they're much, an employer is judging that whether you like it or not. Or if you have certain opinions, more so in the US the last few years, if you have a strong opinion about a certain way of life or a political view or something, you may think that I have free speech and I can do that. And yes, you have free speech to that, but the employer, oftentimes the recruiter, hiring manager, someone may be reviewing that going, okay, we're not going to check that person. And if they have a bunch of other candidates, they can legally and legitimately say, well, we looked at all these other candidates, we found somebody, we don't want to go here. I don't think it's right personally, but it's a way of life. And I've had it done to me where people are asking questions about stuff that, I posted 10 years ago.
Yeah, we see that all the time, especially with politicians that, media will go back decades to find something. So I get that. So here's another one. People ask, and I've always wondered this too. Like, I can understand maybe going back and asking, hey, what was your previous salary? But some people have said that companies, HR managers will go back and they want to know everything that you made. What's up with that?
So I'll go, because I'm over 50, early in my career, filling out an application, it was general. Everyone was asking for all my salary or wages going back to my first job. Now, more in employers and more from a legal standpoint, you shouldn't be asking for a prior salary. And part of it is the liability and legality of offering proprietary information from a former business. But from a practical standpoint, you're getting a new job. Your prior salary has zero to do with your new job at a new employer, but the employer is using that prior salary to kind of gauge what they can offer you. So if you put it down or if you talk about that, then that doesn't help you. In more cases than not, it helps the employer give you a lower offer than what should be fair for the job that you're applying for, not what you used to do.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And I do see that the employers use it as a gauge. I have to be honest with you, I've used it as a gauge myself. But I do understand why someone would be apprehensive about giving their salary or wondering what the heck the HR manager's doing with that. Here's another one that I get, a cover letter. Does anybody, I can say this, when I've got a cover letter, I scan it for a few minutes, and I've interviewed hundreds of people in my career, more than a couple hundred, more than 300 or 400, certainly. I had hiring managers who worked for me. And whenever we look at a cover letter, man, we're just like looking at it real quick. We're scanning it for anything real quick, but people will agonize over a cover letter. How important are they?
Okay, I will say that from an HR background and in talking to my fellow professionals, we're kind of split on this. I think it's a complete waste of time. And the reason why is in jobs, candidates are applying for dozens of jobs. Recruiters are going through many hundreds of resumes that if you're over 50, and this is specific to the over 50 crowd, your resume is going to be more than one page. It's probably going to be closer to 2 pages. So there's a lot to look at. And then I'm going to look at a 3-paragraph cover letter of what you've done. It makes no sense. But we're of the age, though, that for much of our career, cover letter resume was the standard operating procedure to apply for any job out there that other than, let's say, was a fast food job in high school. Most jobs required that. I'm not there are HR people that are adamant about a cover letter, but again, going back to the time, I don't know how many people have the time to read 200 cover letters a day plus 200 resumes. It's just not. And I would often, when I apply for jobs, I don't do a cover letter. And if they're adamant about the cover letter, it tells me a little bit about the business. I'm not going to go there because there's going to be
Yeah.
other hoops. And I think it's a little more antiquated.
Uh-huh.
It's not an up-to-date future thinking process. It's an older company with, I'll say, outdated thinking.
Well, listen, Joric, I actually really enjoyed this conversation. I think you've really addressed many of the questions that we get or that I receive from our viewers here at Over 50 TV. And certainly there's a lot more questions I'm going to be asking you more down the road because I do want to have you back. Let me mention something though that I know you do have two books that you've published. Could you kind of just tell us about them real quick? Would you mind? I know I asked you to have a couple of copies handy. Hopefully you want to show them. You don't mind showing them.
I will. It's a selfless plug, but they're both, they're two books. And when I moved to Portugal, I wanted to write about, they're called Magnet of Madness, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And it's 35 years of crazy, ridiculous workplace stories that at happy hours or when I come home after a long day, I would say, you wouldn't believe what happened at work today. This is all stuff that's happened. And it's happened to me. And I, of course, I encourage people to read it. But more of why I wanted to be on your show is that it's not HR doing things the right way or me doing things, this is the utopian way. Most of it is me screwing up and getting out of ridiculous situations. I got the company in a bad position, but I got out of it. Or I had the best policy in the world that blew up in my face the moment I, gave it to employees. It's more of showing the failures of people and a more human side of somebody that's been in human resource work for a long time.
Well, I'm going to put a link to your two books in the description box for anyone who is interested in purchasing the books. They do sound like a really good read, and I think I'm going to pick both of them up. Well, listen, Joric, I want to thank you once again for being on Over 50 TV. Joric, there's so many people out there who are over 50 years old, who are looking for a job and who have questions, have concerns, and I know that you've been a big help. Thanks again, Joric.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate doing it, and I'm happy to be on.